We see the Russian people are out and protesting against Vladimir Putin. There have been many arrests, thousands braving these sub-freezing temperatures. Alexei Navalny's wife was detained, protesting against his arrest and, of course, previously his poisoning by Russian authorities. You have condemned this, and the Russians have responded saying that this is gross interference, suggesting that we are behind it. Can you respond to that?
Well, first, Andrea, we are deeply disturbed by this violent crackdown against people exercising their rights to protest peacefully against their government, rights that are guaranteed to them in the Russian Constitution. The arrests, the violence used by police is deeply disturbing. And of course, the arrest of Mr. Navalny itself, which apparently triggered this, is also profoundly disturbing to us. But I think the Russian government makes a big mistake if it believes that this is about us. It's not. It's about them. It's about the government. It's about the frustration that the Russian people have with corruption, with kleptocracy. And I think they need to look inward, not outward, and hopefully take into account what they're hearing from their own people. Mr. Navalny is giving expression to the voices of millions and millions of Russians, and that's what this is about.
Should the U.S. sanction the backers of Vladimir Putin as punishment for what has already happened to Navalny?
Andrew, we're reviewing that. We're reviewing a series of Russian actions that are deeply, deeply disturbing. The actions taken against Mr. Navalny, including the apparent use of a chemical weapon against him, but also interference in our elections, the use of cyber tools and the so-called SolarWinds attack that Russia appears to be responsible for, getting into computer networks, both public and private. And finally, we have the reported bounties on American troops in Afghanistan. We're looking into all of these things. All of them are under review. And depending on the findings of those reviews, we will take steps to stand up for our interests and stand against Russian aggressive actions.
Those are all things that President Trump never raised with Vladimir Putin, and President Biden raised it in his very first telephone call. So do the protesters in Russia and the rest of the world, and does Vladimir Putin, most importantly, know that that this is not just rhetoric from you and from President Biden, that there will be real action depending on what the evidence proves?
Andrew, the president could not have been clearer in his conversation with President Putin. And we have to be able to do two things at the same time. We have to be able to advance our interests, as we did in agreeing with Russia to extend the New START arms control agreement, which profoundly serves our own interests in keeping a cap on Russia's core nuclear arsenal and also giving us a lot of inspection rights and visibility on what they're doing, but also to stand up clearly for our interests when they are being threatened, attacked, or abused by Russia. So I think President Biden was very clear in his conversation with President Putin.
You've said that China is the most significant threat. You said that in your confirmation hearings against American national interests. Would you take steps if there is any action by China against Taiwan? Do you see a military confrontation possibly in our future with China?
There's no doubt that China poses the most significant challenge to us of any other country, but it's a complicated one. There are adversarial aspects to the relationship. There's certainly competitive ones, and there's still some cooperative ones too. But whether we're dealing with any of those aspects of the relationship, we have to be able to approach China from a position of strength, not weakness. And that strength, I think, comes from having strong alliances, something China does not have, actually engaging in the world and showing up in these international institutions, because when we pull back, China fills in, and then they're the ones writing the rules and setting the norms of these institutions, standing up for our values when China's challenging them, including in Xinjiang against the Uyghurs or democracy in Hong Kong, making sure that our military is postured so that it can deter Chinese aggression, and investing in our own people so that they can fully compete. But the good news about each of these is that they're fully within our control. And in many ways, the challenge posed by China is as much about some of our own self-inflicted weaknesses as it is about China's emerging strength. But we can address those weaknesses. We can actually build back better in this area too, when it comes to stronger alliances, when it comes to engaging in the world, standing up for our values, investing in our people, making sure our military is properly postured.
Well, with the economy weighing so heavily on many Americans, millions of Americans, should we be lifting the tariffs that were imposed by President Trump on China?
We're reviewing all of that. We have to make sure that anytime we act, the first question we ask ourselves is this advancing the interests of our own people? Is it making them more prosperous? Is it advancing their security? Is it extending their values? That's the first question we have to ask. And so when it comes to something like a tariff, is it doing more harm to us than it is to the country they're being wielded against? That's the question we're asking.
President Trump and Secretary Pompeo referred to the coronavirus as the China virus, the Wuhan virus. Do you think that China needs to be held accountable for not being open about the COVID-19 when it first hit?
There's no doubt that, especially when COVID-19 first hit, but even today, China is falling far short of the mark when it comes to providing the information necessary to the international community, making sure that experts have access to China. That lack of transparency, that lack of being forthcoming is a profound problem, and it's one that continues. And so as we're thinking about both dealing with this pandemic, but also making sure we're in a position to prevent the next one, China has to step up and make sure that it is being transparent, that it is providing information and sharing information, that it is giving access to international experts and inspectors. Its failure to do that is a real problem that we have to address.
Should they pay some price for that?
I think the focus we have to have is both getting full understanding of and accountability for what happened, and there's an investigation that's going on right now, but especially making sure we're putting in place measures to prevent a recurrence.
Should the U.S. join Britain in opening its doors to refugees fleeing the political repression in Hong Kong?
I believe we should. We've seen China act egregiously to undermine the very commitments it made during the handover of Hong Kong from Britain. And we see people who are, again, in Hong Kong, standing up for their own rights, the rights that they thought were guaranteed to them. And if they're the victims of repression from Chinese authorities, we should do something to give them haven.
Our adversaries around the world are using the attack against the Capitol as a propaganda tool against us and against what American democracy really stands for. What message would you send to the members of Congress who are still denying the reality of President Biden's election?
Look, I think there's no doubt that the attack on our own democracy on January 6th creates an even greater challenge for us to be carrying the banner of democracy and freedom and human rights around the world, because for sure, people in other countries are saying to us, well, why don't you look at yourselves first? But I see this very much as a glass half full, because we are, of course, imperfect. And indeed, at the foundation of our own republic is the notion that we would always be striving to form a more perfect union. We never attain that perfection. And the difference, though, between us and so many other countries is that when we are challenged, including when we challenge ourselves, we're doing it in full daylight, with full transparency. We're grappling with our problems in front of the entire world. And the fact of the matter is that sends a powerful message to countries that are trying to sweep everything under the rug. We don't do that. We take on these problems head on. And when it comes to Congress itself, what's so powerful is the members of Congress came back. They came back to those buildings after that terrible and senseless aggression against them and against our democracy. They came back and showed the world that our democracy is resilient, and that is a powerful, positive message for the United States to carry forward.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.